Hello, everyone. In this video, we will discuss some basic management planning and control techniques. These techniques are vital tools for public administrators as they help them make decisions, plan effectively, and control the allocation of resources. Each technique serves a unique purpose in the public sector and its administration, but together they provide a toolkit for effective decision making and project management. Whether we're using the Delphi technique to reach a consensus on a complex issue or applying cost benefit analysis to justify a new public policy, these tools help us bring clarity and structure to the decision making process. Throughout this video, I'll highlight examples from different countries and sectors to show how these techniques are used in practice. The Delphi technique was originally developed in the 1950s by the Rand Corporation. It's a structured process designed to gather input from a group of experts in a way that avoids the influence of dominant voices. This is really useful when we're dealing with complex issues where there might not be enough data to make a straightforward decision. The process starts by selecting a panel of experts who answer questionnaires anonymously. These responses are then summarized and shared with the group. The experts can revise their opinions based on the feedback they receive. This back and forth continues for a few rounds until the group reaches a consensus. This technique is often used in policy formation, strategic planning, and even in forecasting future trends. For example, the Delphi technique was used to prioritize public health investments. Experts across provinces were able to agree on the most critical areas to focus on, which helped in resource allocation. When we think about the public sector, the Delphi technique is especially useful because we often need to make decisions that involve multiple stakeholders. By using Delphi, we ensure that those decisions are well informed and represent the collective expertise of those involved. Now let's take a closer look at the decision tree. A decision tree is essentially a diagram that helps visualize all possible decisions you could make and the consequences of each of those decisions. It's structured like a tree, where each branch represents a possible choice and each leaf shows an outcome, whether it's positive or negative. The idea behind a decision tree is that it gives a clear picture of the different options available and allows us to weigh the risks and benefits associated with each one. In the public sector, we often have to make decisions with incomplete information or face situations where different choices will lead to different results. This decision tree helps by giving us a structured way to evaluate all those possible paths. For example, if we're trying to decide between two public projects, for example, like building a new public park or expanding the transportation system, the decision tree allows us to map out the costs, benefits, and potential outcomes for both options. The decision tree has key components, including nodes, branches, and the outcomes or leaves. Nodes are the decision points where you have to choose between different options. Each node represents a question or decision that needs to be made. Branches are the lines connecting the nodes. Each branch represents a possible action or outcome stemming from a particular decision. Outcomes or leaves are they could be the benefit, cost, or consequence of a particular path. In public sector projects, outcomes could include factors like budget savings, public approval ratings, or even environmental impacts. An example of a decision tree in action is one where the government can use decision trees to choose between different water treatment solutions. It can be used to weigh the environmental impacts of chemical versus natural filtration methods, as well as the long term financial sustainability of each. This allows the government to choose the option that offers the best balance between cost and sustainability. So, how do you actually conduct a decision tree analysis in public administration? Here's a step by step guide. First, you need to define the decision. Start by identifying the key decision that needs to be made. For example, should a city invest in building affordable housing or improve public transportation? You need to clearly define what you are trying to decide. Next, once you know the decision, outline all the possible options. For each option, think about the potential outcomes. These could be positive, like improved or increased public satisfaction, or they can be negative, such as higher costs. Next is assigning probabilities and costs. So, this is where it gets a bit more analytical. You'll want to estimate the probability of each outcome happening. For example, if you build new public housing, what's the likelihood it will reduce homelessness? You also need to consider the costs associated with each outcome, both financial and non financial costs, like environmental or social costs. Lastly, would be to evaluate the tree. Finally, you need to calculate the expected value of each decision by multiplying the potential benefits by their probabilities and subtracting the costs. The option with the highest expected value is often considered the best choice. Let's move now to PERT CPM. PERT stands for Program Evaluation Review Technique, and CPM is the critical path method. Both are project management tools that help in planning, scheduling, and managing large projects with many tasks and dependencies. While they were originally developed for military and industrial purposes, they've become essential tools in public sector project management, particularly for difficult projects that involve many steps and require precise timelines. PERT is most useful when the time to complete each task is uncertain, and you need to estimate task durations based on best case, worst case, and most likely scenarios. CPM, on the other hand, is used when you can predict task durations with more certainty. Together, these tools allow administrators to break down complex projects into smaller tasks and ensure they stay on track. Key steps in the PERT CPM include 1. Task identification. So, the first step is to break the project down into smaller tasks or activities. For instance, if we're building a public hospital, tasks would include site preparation, foundation work, electrical installations, and so on. The next step is time estimation. So PERT allows for three estimates of each task. First is optimistic time, and that is the best case scenario. Second is pessimistic time, worst case scenario. And third is the most likely time, or the most realistic estimate. From these, we calculate the expected time for each task. Third step in PERT CPM would be creating a network diagram. After identifying the tasks and their timelines, we map them out in a sequence to understand how they relate to one another. Some tasks can be done simultaneously, while others must wait until a preceding task is completed. Fourth, critical path identification. The critical path is the sequence of tasks that will take the longest to complete. Any delay in the critical path will delay the whole project. This step helps project managers focus on the tasks that need the most attention. Fifth is monitoring and control. So once the project starts, you continuously monitor progress, especially tasks on the critical path. If a task is delayed, you can adjust resources to prevent further delays. For example, the PERT CPM can be used in building a rapid transit system. By using PERT CPM, project managers can break down the complex construction process into smaller tasks, allocate resources efficiently across these tasks, and avoid costly delays. They can focus on the construction of crucial tunnels that were on the critical path, ensuring the entire project stays on schedule. In the public sector, PERT CPM is particularly useful for managing infrastructure projects, such as building roads, hospitals, or schools. It ensures that resources are used efficiently and that timelines are met. Public administrators can use SPART CPM to identify potential bottlenecks before they occur, allocate resources effectively, and ensure that difficult projects are completed on time and within the budget. The cost benefit analysis, or CBA, is one of the most widely used techniques in public administration, particularly when making decisions about whether to fund a new project or policy. It allows us to systematically compare the total cost of a project with the expected benefits, helping decision makers determine whether the project is worth pursuing or not. CBA is essential because it gives public administrators a clear picture of the economic feasibility of a project. It also helps justify decisions to stakeholders, whether it's the public, the politicians, or external partners, by demonstrating that the chosen course of action will provide more benefits than costs. So, what is cost benefit analysis? The CPA involves four main steps. First is defining the project. And in this first step, we are to clearly define the project or policy. This includes understanding the scope, the goals, and potential impact. For example, a government might be considering a new transportation system or a public health initiative. So that would be representative of the first step where you are defining the project. The next step is to identify costs and benefits. We now have to list all potential costs and benefits. These include not only direct financial costs, such as construction, operational expenses, and staffing, but also indirect or intangible costs and benefits. For example, public safety improvements, environmental impact, or the long term economic growth resulting from a project. Third is costs might include upfront capital expenses, operating costs, maintenance, and any potential environmental harm. Now, benefits might include increased public health, economic growth, job creation, or reduced congestion. The next step is quantifying costs and benefits. After identifying the costs and benefits, the next step is to assign monetary values to them. So this can be straightforward for direct costs, but it can also be more challenging for intangible benefits like improved quality of life or environmental preservation. For intangible factors, public administrators might use proxies or estimates to put a value on them. Lastly would be calculating net benefits. And here we subtract the total costs from the total benefits. If the benefits outweigh the costs, the project is considered viable. A higher net benefit means the project is more attractive and it is worth pursuing. For example, CBA can be used to assess the viability of transitioning to renewable energy sources. A project like this would involve a significant upfront investment in wind and solar energy infrastructure. But the CBA can demonstrate that the long term environmental and economic benefits, like reduced carbon emissions, cleaner air, and energy independence, far outweigh the initial costs. This analysis provides the justification for a large scale shift toward sustainable energy. Now we move on to budgetary control. And at its core, budgetary control involves monitoring and comparing actual spending against the planned budget. It helps public administrators ensure that funds are used efficiently and that the financial health of the organization remains intact. So here's how it works. First, you set a budget, and you need to create realistic budget based on the projected expenses for a project or department. This budget is often set by considering past spending patterns or the expected future needs and the overall financial goals of the government. Second, you need to track expenses. So once the budget is set, public administrators continuously track actual expenditures against the budget. This helps them identify any areas where spending is exceeding expectations. Third, variance analysis is a critical tool in budgetary control. It involves comparing the budgeted amount with the actual spending and identifying the reasons for any variances. For example, if a project is running over budget, variance analysis can help pinpoint the cause, such as unforeseen costs or inefficient resource allocation. Fourth, forecasting future needs. And effective budgetary control also involves forecasting future expenses based on current spending trends. This allows administrators to make proactive adjustments to the budget and avoid potential financial shortfalls later in the project. So, the benefits of budgetary control are plenty, but the main ones include that it avoids or prevents overspending. So, by tracking actual expenses against the budget, public administrators can avoid spending more than the allocated funds. Second is increased accountability. Budgetary control provides a clear record of how public funds are being used, which increases transparency and accountability to taxpayers and government oversight bodies. Third, it enables proactive adjustments. By forecasting future spending based on current trends, administrators can make adjustments to avoid financial shortfalls or overruns later in the project. And lastly, it improves resource allocation. So, variance analysis helps identify areas where resources are being used inefficiently, allowing for reallocation to more critical areas. So imagine a government agency responsible for managing public transportation services. The agency sets a budget at the start of the fiscal year, covering maintenance, salaries, fuel, and service expansions. Halfway through the year, they notice that fuel prices have increased significantly, causing them to exceed the budgeted amount for fuel. Using budgetary control, the agency performs a variance analysis to understand the impact of rising fuel costs on the overall budget. They identify that spending in other areas, such as vehicle maintenance, is lower than expected. The agency can then reallocate some of the unspent funds from maintenance to cover the additional fuel costs, ensuring that they stay within the overall budget while continuing to provide uninterrupted services. In the public sector, budgetary control ensures that every penny is accounted for and that resources are used effectively to meet public needs. For public administrators, budgetary control is essential for maintaining financial discipline and ensuring that projects remain on track without risking overspending. It also helps build trust with the public as it demonstrates that public funds are being managed responsibly. Whether managing infrastructure projects, social programs, or government departments, public administrators can use budgetary controls to make informed financial decisions, address emerging financial challenges, and keep projects within their allocated budgets. Next, we have inventory control, and this involves managing the procurement, storage, and distribution of goods in a way that minimizes costs while ensuring the necessary supplies are readily available. In the public sector, inventory control is essential for managing items like medical supplies or construction materials or office equipment and even public safety gear. There are two widely used methods for inventory control. First is JIT or just in time, and this approach ensures that supplies arrive only when needed, reducing the cost of holding and storing excess inventory. The idea is to minimize storage costs and prevent wastage by aligning supply deliveries closely with the actual demand. The other widely used method for inventory control would be EOQ or economic order quantity. EOQ helps determine the optimal quantity of inventory to order at a given time, balancing the costs of ordering and holding inventory. This method ensures that you order the right amount of supplies, reducing the risk of overstocking or frequent ordering. Key steps in inventory control include classifying the inventory, determining stock levels, and monitoring and adjustment. For classifying inventory, you need to identify and categorize different types of supplies, whether They are medical equipment, for example, building materials for infrastructure projects, or emergency response kits. Each category of supplies may require different management strategies, hence, the need to classify them. Next, you move on to determining the stock levels. So, use forecasting and historical data to determine how much stock is required at any given time. This is where methods like JIT and EOQ come into play to ensure optimal stock levels. Next, you monitor and adjust. Continuously monitor stock levels, usage patterns, and supply chains. Make adjustments based on real time data and demand forecasts to prevent overstocking or shortages. Let's imagine a government department managing medical supplies for public hospitals. At the beginning of the year, they project the expected usage of personal protective equipment or PPE, vaccines, and other critical medical items. However, halfway through the year, there is an unexpected health crisis, and that increases the demand for these supplies. By using just in time inventory control, the department can order supplies in smaller, more frequent quantities, aligning deliveries with real time demand to avoid overstocking. They also implement EOQ to ensure they order the most cost efficient amount of PPE to balance the high demand with manageable storage costs. Now, throughout the year, they continue monitoring inventory levels and adjusting orders based on actual usage, ensuring that hospitals are well stocked without overspending on storage. This approach not only ensures that the department can meet the increased demand during the health crisis, but it also avoids the pitfalls of wasteful overstocking, which would drain valuable public funds. Inventory control is crucial in various public sector operations, from managing emergency response supplies to overseeing the materials needed for public works projects. For instance, a public transportation department might need to manage the inventory for spare parts for buses and trains, ensuring that they have enough on hand to perform maintenance without holding onto too much unnecessary stock. Now, in the public sector, quality control frameworks like ISO standards and Total Quality Management, or TQM, are commonly used. These frameworks help public organizations continuously monitor their processes, identifying inefficiencies, and making improvements. With ISO standards, for instance, specific guidelines are provided to ensure that services meet internationally recognized benchmarks for quality. TQM goes further by involving all stakeholders in a continuous improvement process to enhance service delivery. So, to implement quality control, you first need to define the quality standards. So, set the measurable and clearly defined quality standards that these services must meet. And these could be based on regulatory guidelines or international standards like ISO. The second step is to conduct regular inspections and audits. So these are key to maintaining quality standards. This process involves assessing whether public services are meeting the set guidelines. Third is to do continuous improvement. So, quality control is not a one time effort, and public administrators must ensure that any deficiencies identified during audits are corrected and that services are continuously improved to meet evolving public needs. Now, consider a scenario where a public healthcare agency implements TQM in its operations. The agency might regularly review the quality of care provided in public hospitals and clinics, monitoring patient outcomes, staff efficiency, and facility conditions. They might also use TQM principles to involve all staff, from doctors and nurses to administrative personnel. By applying these principles, the agency might discover that wait times in emergency rooms are longer than acceptable. They could then redesign the patient flow process to reduce bottlenecks, and that improves both patient satisfaction and the healthcare outcomes. In this case, TQM ensures that the public healthcare system continuously evolves to meet the needs of citizens without compromising quality. For public administrators, implementing quality control ensures that government services are delivered efficiently and effectively, meeting the high standards expected by citizens. Whether managing public infrastructure or transportation or healthcare, quality control frameworks like TQM help ensure that these services are continuously improved and aligned with public expectations. It not only guarantees that taxpayer money is well spent, but also fosters trust in public institutions. And lastly, game theory is a powerful tool for understanding and analyzing the interactions between different stakeholders, such as government agencies, private contractors, and the public. In the public sector, game theory helps public administrators predict how these various actors will behave in competitive or cooperative situations, allowing for better strategic decision making. It is particularly useful when there are conflicting interests or when decisions by one party affect the outcomes of others. Key concepts in game theory include Nash equilibrium and the zero sum games. The Nash equilibrium occurs when all parties involved in the decision making process choose the best possible strategy for themselves, given the strategies of others. In this state, no party has an incentive to change their strategy unless another party does. A zero sum game is a scenario where one party's gain is exactly balanced by another party's loss. In public administration, this might occur in situations where one department's increase in funding must come from the reduction of another department's budget. So, how do you apply game theory in the public sector? First, you need to identify the stakeholders. So, identify all the relevant stakeholders that are included in the decision making process. So, this would include the government agencies, contractors, local communities, and private companies. Once you've identified them, proceed to modeling the interactions. In this step, you are to model how their decisions might affect one another. So, this involves mapping out potential strategies for each party and predicting how they might react based on their incentives and goals. Third is to simulate outcomes. By running simulations of different strategies, administrators can identify the most likely outcome. This allows them to choose policies or negotiation tactics that lead to the most favorable result for the public. So let's consider a public infrastructure project where a government agency is negotiating with private contractors and the local communities. The agency's goal is to complete the project on time and within budget, while the contractor wants to maximize profits and the local community wants to minimize disruptions. By applying game theory, the public administrator can model how each party might behave under different conditions. For example, if the contractor is offered performance based incentives for early completion, this might encourage faster work, benefiting both the government and the contractor. Meanwhile, if the local community is involved early in the planning process, their concerns about disruptions can be addressed by reducing the likelihood of delays caused by community opposition. This structured approach to understanding interactions ensures that all parties' motivations are taken into account, leading to a more successful project outcome. In the public sector, game theory is particularly useful in negotiations, policy development, and resource allocation. Whether working on public private partnerships or PPP, resolving conflicts between departments, or managing relations with external stakeholders, game theory helps administrators anticipate the behaviors of others and strategize for the best outcomes. It allows for more collaboration in the decision making process, where all parties' interests are considered and aligned toward a common goal. Now, let's introduce a real life case study that highlights the power of data driven decision making in the public sector. In 2012, the U.S. Internal Revenue Service, or IRS, was facing serious challenges, including a rising number of identity theft cases and a significant tax gap from small businesses. To address these problems, the IRS created the Office of Compliance Analytics, or OCA. The OCA introduced data driven decision making practices using advanced data analytics to implement fraud detection strategies and close the tax gap. The key here was leveraging data analytics to identify patterns in tax filings and fraud cases. So, what does data driven decision making really mean for public administrators? It involves using real time data to guide decisions, improving the accuracy and timeliness of responses. In the public sector, data driven decision making can help us anticipate problems, allocate resources more effectively, and continuously improve service delivery. The key takeaway here is that public administration is increasingly about making decisions based on reliable data, not just intuition or past practices. By incorporating data analytics into our management techniques, we can deliver better, more accountable public services. Finally, this case is relevant to public administrators because it shows how public sector organizations can transform their operations by using data driven decision making. It also highlights the importance of agility in government, especially when facing complex challenges like fraud detection and resource optimization.